Welcome to the Women on the Rise podcast. I'm Jen Blandos, the founder of Female Fusion, and this is where we look at everything entrepreneurship for female entrepreneurs. Whether you are just getting started or you have a 7 or 8 figure business, we cover the topics that matter most to you as you are building, growing, and scaling your business. Welcome to another episode of Women on the Rise. And today I'm sitting down with Elaine Jones. And Elaine Jones is a woman who I've wanted to have on the podcast from the very beginning. And the reason is she's a bit special to me. She is one female entrepreneur who I've always looked up to and who I think is someone that we can learn so much from all of her wisdom and what she's done in business. So, Elaine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for those very kind words. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. And I know that when we finish the interview, everybody will know why I see you as a mentor and I look up to you so much because you are so wise in the world of business. Before we
Experienced.
You're experienced, you're wise, you've done remarkable things in your career. Why don't you tell everybody a bit about who you are and what you've done?
Okay. Well, for all I've done, it's because I've had support from family, which is critical to be able to be successful, in my belief, or support of someone who's there behind you all the time. Makes a huge difference. But I came to Dubai when I was 21 as a newlywed. And I took a job with a real estate company because it had a car, because we actually didn't have much, obviously, at those times.
Makes sense.
So I took this job as a car to be the villa lady. Well, I'm not particularly a good salesperson, but I did quite enjoy it until some of the experiences of that were quite remarkable, quite interesting. They're interesting stories for another day. But then my husband said to me, I don't know, you work so hard. Why are you working for other people? You should have your own business. And by that time, I'd moved into the field of property management, which is much more my bias, much more my way of doing things, very organised, very planned. I enjoy property management. It was something that matched my skill set and my personality. So I spoke to Sultan Sulaim, well, Mohammed bin Sulaim first, then Sultan bin Sulaim, and he said, well, I think we've got a trade licence, which was Ahmed Sulaim Trading Enterprises Company. And of course, to answer that on the telephone was far too many words, so it became a STICO. And as time went by, bearing in mind that property management was always our primary vertical, it was a STICO property management.
Right.
But as the town grew and as the dynamics, specifically of Dubai really for me, but then we grew into all of the Emirates, as the markets changed, so we added different business verticals. So it made us, by the time I sold it in 2021, it was the largest private multidisciplinary real estate practice in the Emirates. But in part, that was because of longevity, because we were established from the very beginning. But equally, you know, the effort you put in is what you get out. You reap what you sow. But it's also very important to note that the connectivity to the family, the bin Sulaim family in the early days, and then in 2004, which was really the big turning point for us, was when we were approached by an international company to take over a STICO, and instead we said no, we will be engaging what I called the suits to come on board to raise our level of professionalism.
Right.
So the company really became world-class, professional in 2004 because we had the suits join us. And as I know, many people also believe, the real skill in having a successful business is in employing the right people.
Yeah.
Or having the right people as part of your team.
And one of the hardest things for business owners to do is get the team bit.
Absolutely.
Right.
But as with most industries, I would expect, the world of real estate is very closely connected. So you would find, or I found, so I engaged one gentleman, and they all well, they weren't all men actually. The first tier were, then we managed to get some girls to come on board. but the connectivity of them to one another, because they'd worked in other territories, and we needed to be international, because if that's one thing about the Emirates that sets us aside from the rest of the world, is we are the most international. And we are able, and we work side by side, and we don't have all sorts of issues that you might find in other territories. So we had a good mix. But equal to them are the team of people, and I have employees, well, of course it's not my company now, but I still have, or there are people who've been with Estico for decades. So our troops were very dedicated. We ran the business very much as a family business is probably, well, it is. It was like a family business because people were included. We would do brainstorming. We would invite people for their ideas and implement them where they made sense.
But that wasn't really common back in 80s, 90s, even early noughties. Companies didn't do that. It was more
we always have.
From the top, I tell you what to do.
No, you see, that's never been my way because I grew the business. We started at basics, and because we were growing not only in size but type of business. So as property management was the original cornerstone of the business, because if you manage property, then you know the demographic, what people are prepared to pay, what it costs to run the building. It's data, and data is key, which continues to be the case. But by having that information, then we could run the transactional team from one side. We created the advisory team. But with the implementation of RERA, and anyway, over the years, trade licences had different categories. And because we were there, and because Estico were already doing these businesses, we managed to secure licences. And by the time I sold the business, I had 6 different licences, which covered
everything.
Real estate in the Emirates. Dubai more than some of the other Emirates. We didn't have everything, but here we had everything. And our database and our knowledge, and because people had been with us for such a long time, we were king.
Interesting.
Very interesting. But you see how lucky I was. Where else in the world would we have been, or would I have come in 1980? And, you know, the changes are enormous.
Yeah.
And I was quite involved with a lot of new Dubai. Old Dubai, all buildings would have had, most of the buildings on Sheikh Zayed Road, which was our main road, would have had an Estico input. Either we did the agency, or we property managed, or we helped with giving advisory on what to do with the plot. So that very special and was a very important strip of land in Dubai, Estico was involved in a high percentage of those buildings.
And you were involved in one of the biggest landmark property projects in the UAE. Maybe tell everybody a bit about that.
And you see how exciting that was?
Yeah.
And I presume you're talking about the Palm.
I am.
We started in, it would have been 1995. In 1995, we started working on Jebel Ali. It was called Jebel Ali Gardens. It's the estate behind what is now House Discovery Gardens. And the gardens was built to provide residential accommodation for people who were working at Jebel Ali Free Zone.
Right.
Because at that time, they were travelling in from Sharjah or other places because the prices were different and what have you. And the gardens we developed was very much price conscious so that people could move there. Sorry, I've digressed a bit, but that was how things started with Jebel Ali Properties as it was in those days. But in fact, the gardens apartments were finished just as Internet City was finished. So, in fact, we didn't meet the requirement. Anyway, that's by the by. For the Palm, and it would have been about 96, 97, His Highness said to Sultan Sulayem, Mohammed Al Abar and Mohammed Gagawi, Dubai needs more waterfront property. Come up with some ideas. And Sultan engaged with a gentleman called Warren Pickering, a New Zealand concept architect. And he started the designs that Sultan was going to submit to His Highness for the Palm. And it's fascinating how the design for that island grew.
So it was 3 developers who were told,
Come
give
up with
me
your
a
ideas.
design.
Come up with your ideas.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you remember what other designs there were? If
I wasn't privy to them.
So you didn't know?
No.
So all we know
I only knew what we were doing, because obviously
Yeah.
everything was extremely confidential. So Sultan used Estico offices. We gave the support that was necessary. There was a gentleman called Syed Ahmed Syed from Sultan's engineering team, very heavily involved. And we put together the scheme with using Halcro, Duckco and others.
Yeah.
And it was approved by His Highness in 1999. That's right. Because in 2000, he approved it. And in 2001, it was first spoken about at ATM, the Arabian Travel Market.
Wow.
And interestingly then, His Highness also said, let's consider for Jebel Ali as well as the Jumeirah Palm Jumeirah. And that's how it all came about. So that decade, that time, from 1990, late 1990s, through to 2008, really, the number of innovative projects that were conceptualized.
Crazy.
Well, but to have a leader, to have a ruler, to have someone who is just so visionary, I mean, it is remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, I come from a country called England, where to get planning consent to actually put a third runway at the airport, which is, in my opinion, been vital forever, it still hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Right. What is this? This is such a dynamic place. So very lucky to have been involved in that. The very exciting days. I mean, the people we met, the stories one could tell about the different personalities of when it was launched for sale. It was such fun. I mean, it was mad, but such fun.
And then you were involved as well, that Estico was selling all of the plots on the
you see, there's an interesting one, because there was the debate about conflict of interest, which you can imagine from my perspective was not particularly welcome. But I understood it. So His Highness kindly, we were given 2 roads that we were able to properly broker, but otherwise we were on a cost-plus basis. Anyway, that's fine.
Okay.
It was a wonderful opportunity. Such fun. Met so many interesting people. Really, it was such fun. But what it meant then for Estico was that we then started work for sub-developers rather than for what then became Nakheel.
Okay.
Because it wasn't so complicated.
Yeah,
we could do the projects. And again, in that generation of time, we could do the complete sales management. So we had most wonderful software for doing sales, and I hope we were. I'm sure there were times where people did things they shouldn't have done, but in the main, we tried to keep all our transactions as clean as is absolutely possible by using good systems.
Yeah.
And that today, with the technology that's now available, is so much easier to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't have sympathy with organisations that have suffered where backhanders or nonsense have gone on between brokers, because if you use system, it's not possible.
Yeah.
So, people have got to understand the need for process, and I'm a very process person. I love things to be organised. It suits me very well.
Business.
That's right.
It's so important.
Oh.
It's so important. And I'm surprised when companies don't make that a priority, right? Because it saves you time and money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also nowadays, with the data collection, imagine for us as an advisory, the data we collected, and of course it's on a note, you don't ever divulge anybody's name.
Of course.
But to know the nationality, the age bracket, the income bracket, because you can sort of assess that by the amount of money people are spending either on rent or on sales, it's huge.
Well, it helps you make better business decisions,
it does.
Right?
And for our clients, when it came to valuations, we have the data. We have data going all the way back, really, from probably the early 90s, because that was about the time that computers became properly used in the business. I mean, I remember I had one of those great big desktop things from as early as 1985. But I think we were doing most things on Excel. Well, I don't know even if we had Excel sheets. Anyway, it was all very basic. But as you can imagine, nowadays, for all of the advisory firms, they use AI to create models of what's happening and what have you. And just the sheer amount of data that we have available is huge.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It's when you have that data, it just makes it so much easier to run your business. Yeah. And I wish that more people would think about that, sometimes when they're setting up and structuring their business
Yes.
as well. Did you find, so over all of the years from the 80s up until a few years ago when you sold, did you find that it was tough being a woman in this industry? Or
Do you know not? No, because if you look at my main competitors in the early days, they were all women. In the world of agency, a lot of my competitors were female. But equally, Dubai specifically has always had a strong female presence within the companies and the families that I've dealt with.
do you find, I've found this, so I haven't been in the region as long as you have, been around for over 15 years. I would always hear from people, they'd be like, oh, don't you find it hard working in the region, being a woman? And the thing that I felt is I actually got more respect. And I found it was easier to operate, even when I was operating in Saudi Arabia, even in the early days when I would go meet government ministers in buildings where women weren't allowed, you would get more respect.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I've never, ever had an issue here. Never.
It's interesting. I haven't either, actually. I have had situations in Europe where I've been asked to make the tea or bring in the coffee, which is,
Different.
as a outspoken woman, can be, you have to hold your tongue and
Well, in part it's because, again, in one of the early meetings I had with a gentleman who actually ran a bank or was a bank manager, but also looked after the family property. One of the early conversations I had with him was, he said, the most important person in the household is my mother. And if my mother wants something, she is my priority. So where you have a culture where your mother, which, let's face it, as women, it is our obligation and duty to make sure that our sons behave the way that we think is acceptable.
of course.
Because if we don't train them, nobody else is going to. So the fact that a woman is actually so highly regarded here within the family, I think I've never felt that it's been difficult being female. And in fact, a lot of it is to do with the way you interact with people, and I don't think it needs to be a problem.
Yeah. No, I agree with you as well. And so you sold Estico a couple of years ago.
That's right.
That's been your career for how long? How did you know when it was the time to sell?
Well, I was first approached in 2020, just before COVID, and then COVID hit. So if when I was approached I wasn't sure, by the time COVID came, like, I felt, well, actually, because equally, I owned the company its entirety by that stage. I'd bought my other shareholders out. And I became aware that there are big movers in the market. And really, for me to take the company to the next level, which in fairness is what it needed a good capital injection.
Yeah.
And did I have the appetite to take in venture capitalists or somebody else who would come in and partner with me when maybe some would consider me bossy? I don't know, but I'm also used to doing things my own way. So did I really have the energy and enthusiasm for that? Equally, for the employees, what COVID taught me was, and we had certainly 1 month, maybe 6 weeks, where the money stopped coming because people weren't paying rents, and our management fees will be based on collections, etc., and nobody was doing valuations. You can imagine.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, and I've always believed that for every person you employ, you're actually responsible for 10 people.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, now what? Say that something different to COVID, but equally as paralysing to the business or the way that it operated should occur. What do? I don't have, as an individual, I didn't feel at my age that I really wanted that responsibility. So timing was right, to be honest. And from the employee's standpoint, to belong to a corporate, there's no risk that they won't get their salaries paid. And I always paid salaries. I never didn't. And in fact, one of my employees reminds me of this. In 1991, now was it 1991? I think it was, the Iraq-Kuwait invasion, the banks, something happened and we didn't have money. So we couldn't take money from the bank, and I can't for the life of me remember why. But Varghese, who was with me for over 20 years, he said, Elaine, don't you remember you took the money from petty cash and whatever money you had so that each of us could have enough money to do what we needed to do until the cash flow, the money came. I mean, we had the money, but we didn't physically have it. And, I don't actually remember it, but he reminded me, he said, you made sure that we all had enough money to do whatever it was we needed to do for the 10 days or 15 days, it wasn't long, that there was some hiccup with something or other. But I know that with the new owners, the employees are under no risk from that perspective. Equally, they have an opportunity that I couldn't give them. They are now within an organisation where they can come in as an intern and they can retire as a director of this, that, whether it be valuation or executive director of finance or legal, the potential now for those staff. And you think in all my years, I employed over 900 people. But you think of those now who want a proper career and to be in a corporate environment, they have that opportunity, which I don't think I could have given. Yeah. Equally, I probably made a mistake and I should have stayed more present because the transition was very difficult. From a family, collaborative, everybody respected, got on with everybody all the time, to a very corporate environment was quite shocking.
Really? And so a lot of the employees struggled with that?
Yes, because it was very different. And I probably, if I had known, if I had my time again, which is something you might ask, I would definitely have been more involved for certainly the first 6 months. Okay. Because I think it would have made it easier for the company who bought us and for the employees who were part of the company.
And so when you were bought out, did you exit right away?
Yes.
Or so you didn't stay around, you didn't do an earn out?
I remained as an advisor. But again, people do things in different ways, Jen. And how I would have done it had I been hands-on still involved is very different to when you're asked for advice. And you can imagine I'm quite vocal and I often speak out and I say what I think. But then the other side has to be happy to listen. Whereas if I was more involved in the business, I think, of course, I would have been right pain probably, but I would have been happier that the transition could have been a more pleasant experience.
And that's such a hard thing, isn't it? That they bought you and they have a vision with how they want to have the business, which is great. Yeah. But then you also have your employees that have been doing things a certain way. Some of them for, do you have anyone who's been there for 30, 40 years?
No, 25, I think it is, or maybe 27 now.
But even
it's a
5
long
years,
time.
10 years, it's a long time.
And not everybody adapts to change.
No.
So it's not the new owner's fault that some people can't change because they're so used to doing things in a certain way. But equally, the way of managing a new team of people, and it's a people business.
Hard.
It's a people business. Your people are your greatest asset. So, if I had my time again, I would certainly have done that differently.
And when the deal was finalised, because you had that business for 40 years.
38 or 37.
37, so 37 years. Yeah. How did it feel like when the ink was there on the contract?
Well, I can't give too much away, but it actually got signed by DocuSign at 23:59 on the 31st of December 2020. So...
Wow.
It was a very strange New Year's Day. And I think I would perhaps give advice to people also that negotiating to sell something that you are so emotionally invested in, it's very difficult. And it wasn't what I would call a pleasant experience. And because of the methodology of the way that I was used to working and the methodology of a corporate, it was quite a clash.
Yeah.
So, but leaving the company, and I didn't feel I was leaving because with the people I was still going in. I mean, I did travel immediately because my mother wasn't well, which is where the mistake was made. I should have said, no, actually, I'm not coming out of the business and I'm going to go and do this trip, and then I'm coming back, because then it was COVID and travel and what have you all of a sudden became, anyway, whatever. We got all through that. But then I did, and still do to a certain extent, I'm in contact with people all the time because they've been like family.
Yeah.
And, I knew everybody's situation. And so you can't just walk away. I mean, just because you're not necessarily doing business, you can't just leave people.
And did you, when you went through that deal, did you have somebody representing you?
Yes, I did. And that is essential.
So you
absolutely
didn't do it
essential.
yourself.
Well, but of course you have to answer questions and you have to make decisions. There's a huge amount of decisions. And the paperwork, good Lord. And equally, I would have expected, the legal process was unnecessarily burdensome for all people involved. I would say that the whole sector needs to be simplified. It's unnecessarily heavy.
Wow. And so that adds so much more emotional burden to it as well.
Painful.
Yeah.
Painful.
So after you did that, you're a woman who can't stand still because you've got so many other things going on at the same time. One project that you're involved in is bringing direct debit to the UAE.
Well, that started in Astico. That Umir Bhatt, who is the founder of Direct Debit Systems, came to me and said he has got the system to be able to write into our software to be able to accept rental payments by direct debit. And of course, this is what I've been waiting for forever.
Yeah, rather than...
Totally embraced it.
Because I guess for people who are listening as well, because we have people all over the world that this might seem strange to them, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, everything was by check.
And you can imagine also the amount of, as a property management company, and even from a tenant, the amount of time and effort to write down all those checks, make sure the checks are actually properly written, and people get tired. So by the time you get to the 10th check or the 12th check, the signature doesn't match. Then you have to do the administration of doing the receipt. Then every time the check's due, you have to take it from the safe, and so you've got to file it, and then you've got to be able to do the paying in slip, and then some poor soul called Mad who goes off and pays it into the bank. Then we have to wait, and because the banks don't like receiving maybe 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 checks on a day. So then these poor guys have to wait until the end of the day because there are so many checks being banked. Oh, goodness. And then once they'd been banked, the result of the banking had to be recorded. Did it clear, did it not clear, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, and so the amount of time as a property manager handling checks or payments for rent is just enormous. So I invested in the business, which I'm pleased I did, but actually our system, it was written into EstateMan, which was the Astico software, which, again, if I had my time again, I would have negotiated to keep that software because it is the best.
Yeah.
And it was something that, as part of the sale, was a very important part of the IP of the business because it is superb software. But because in the early version, payments had to bounce through our sponsoring bank, lending banks weren't prepared to accept that. They wanted the money to go directly to them, which is all a bit strange, really, because nobody's physically going to actually be taking any of the money. Anyway, but now the system is integrated and the transactions directly with central bank.
That's great.
So there's no middle party. It's straightforward. We only did our first transaction in September. Well, we trialled it previously, but now it's functioning properly. And the reason that also takes time is because it's a fully paper-free process. So we are integrated with UAE Pass, or UAE Pass is integrated with us, I don't know which way around you do it, so that everything is done on the app, and the merchant can invite their payee to complete the form on the app, and that's
so
it.
Good.
And there are lots of advantages from a contractual standpoint, because for landlords particularly, and insurance companies, and people at schools, when they have a contract with someone to actually make payments, by having a pull system as opposed to the push system, which is so common with most of the payment apps, it gives the landlord or the school or the merchant some confidence that actually they will collect the money on a regular basis.
Correct, yeah.
It's not that you have to go to the app every month and say, oh, yes, I'm going to pay it this month or not, which is just doesn't work.
And it's funny because it's been so common in other markets
Absolutely.
for years, like
bizarre.
The UK forever.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that's really interesting is that finally, after so many years, that technology is here. And I think even for businesses as well, it's going to make things so much easier. If I think about how much we even at Female Fusion pay for credit card fees.
Yes. Yes, that's an important saving.
Right?
Because it's a fixed fee that is regulated. So that's how that works. And it can make merchants or save merchants and landlords, anybody who receives payments through credit card.
Especially if it's bigger
large amounts
as
of
well,
course.
right?
Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So and we're bank agnostic because your bank possibly can offer you a direct debit system, but it's not bank agnostic and they don't have the reconciliation facility that we have.
Which is what you need.
Ability that
if
we
you're
have.
running a business.
Because otherwise you don't know who's paid you.
Oh my goodness, if you didn't have that reconciliation.
Yes.
What's the point of having that?
Well, almost. That's it, because it takes you as long. But even with bank transfers and things like that, the number of vendors who say to me, oh, can you send me a screenshot when you made the payment? You think, oh, surely your systems can show you what. Anyway, so with our system.
Sadly, no, a lot of times not, right?
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But the whole banking industry, the whole payment industry, which is also extends into other businesses. I mean, if you look at property management as a business, with the right technology, and I believe that in the future, a lot of the process of property management, but more specifically brokerage, will be done online.
Yeah, as it should be, right?
I think so. You know, whether, and again, I did try to promote the use of auctioning property, because of
course, that could be done.
It would be so much more straightforward.
Yeah.
All of the information, all the due diligence will be available online. So when you do go to buy a property, you can understand exactly what it is, because it's contractually obligated. You need to know who's building on the plot next door, what the building regulations are. Will the apartments, or has the property that's been built, are there any issues with it?
Yeah.
So by bidding online will also give the true market price.
So many things that are possible with the digital economy now.
Yeah.
And it's so important that all businesses, whether you're big businesses or small businesses, really look at how they can bring that into.
It's vital.
Yeah.
Vital. And that means that the companies can grow, but you can take on more business without having to take on more people.
Right.
You know, so, because the key, I guess, to success is going to be best use of technology and best customer service.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have those two ingredients, you are lost.
Right. I had a conversation with a business owner the other day, and they were saying to me, well, we accept payments in cash only. And my reaction was the same as yours. I was like, what do you mean only in cash? She's like, yeah, no, we want cash because that's a guaranteed payment. And I said to her, don't you realize how much business you're losing? Like if somebody told me it was a cash payment, I would go somewhere else because I don't have cash.
No,
I don't want
cash.
I don't want to go to the cash machine. Cash is dirty, all of this sort of stuff. If I can't pay digitally, and if you're not going to send me a link to do it, I'm going to go somewhere else. Yeah. And I found it was really interesting that still there's some people who haven't bought into the digital economy as a business owner. It's
very surprising because it can only be a matter of time when cash will go.
Of course.
Because if you look at India, and I don't think anybody has cash there anymore, everybody's doing their payments through phone, and it's instant payment systems. You know, they've got very fast moving, excellent banking systems. So, and Africa has been the same for a long time, hasn't it?
Right,
that people receive their money and make their payments off their phones. So to be wanting to use cash in this day and age seems, and I think COVID cured most of us from cash, didn't it? Because as you say, we couldn't go to the bank anyway, didn't want to touch it. So...
well, this is like my big drive. And actually one of the things that MasterCard, who's one of our partners in Female Fusion, has been amazing about is that trying to help people understand that technology in your business is a really good thing. And it's going to make your life easier. It's going to make things quicker. Like couldn't you imagine, like, rather than cash, you're going to have that money in your bank account right away, or within a week if it's credit card payment. Yeah.
And again, it's a funny old world, isn't it? It's much better if everything is done in a way that it can be tracked and seen. And,
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who think, no, it's curtailing our freedom and privacy and all this.
Makes it easier when you have to have your accounts audited every year.
Absolutely.
Now as well, like, I think about that, like, as a business owner, what's going to make it easier for the audit?
Yeah.
Because those, like, going through those are so soul destroying that I just want everything digital so they can find it.
That's right.
And
so much easier.
Yeah.
It really is.
And it's so interesting, like, going from 1980, how business was then,
so
to
different.
how it is
Can you
today,
imagine?
right?
We didn't have mobile phones.
Yeah.
They introduced those dreadful bleeper things once. I said, no, I'm not having one of those. It would be like a dog. That's right, a pager. I said, I'm not going to be summoned by a bleeper. No, a pager. No, so I didn't accept that. And the first mobile phones, of course, were those the Motorola blocks.
Yeah. And the ones you'd carry in the briefcase,
almost,
right? Yeah.
But things change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually, if you look at my work, I started work in 1975 when I worked for Rolls-Royce in the UK. I left school at 16 and did my college education as day release, NCH in Business Studies. I had such fun at Rolls-Royce. That was a whole thing. But if you imagine from the time that I started work through to now, the evolution of the way people work, well, I suppose there'll be others who've worked for 50 years who would have the same sentiment. But I think I've probably worked in one of the most exciting periods of time. We've watched such dynamic changes in the way we do things, but still, people, respect, most important, treat people with respect, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. There we go, customer service.
Right.
It's what it's all about.
And I agree with you. It doesn't matter what decade or whatever it was, that it comes down to how you treat people. And also, I think your integrity and your ethics as well. As I've been a business owner for over 20 years now, so not as experienced as you are, but I really see and I really value more than anything now integrity, and want to only work with people that have integrity. And I don't know if you found this in your journey, that I found that I got to a point where it was like, if I don't feel that they're aligned with my values, I just say no. I'm not interested in chasing money to work with somebody who isn't going to be aligned with where I am.
Well, it's interesting because obviously along the way I've met some interesting people.
Of course.
And there have been disappointments. There have been people that you would have expected to behave better. But that's life, and we learn from it, and we just teach our children and say to ourselves, that's how we don't behave.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love about you, Elaine, is that you are just such a honest, genuine, kind person.
Try to be.
And I see this in business sometimes, that there's, well, and we see it on social media, right? That there's a lot of people being like peacocks and showing off and look at my beautiful feathers and my business is so great and look at my clothes and look at my expensive cars. And that doesn't make you a successful entrepreneur.
Not at all. It's the person you are.
Yeah.
That's what makes you successful.
Yeah.
And being kind is important, but it all comes down to that respect, doesn't it?
Respect, yeah. Respect for yourself, respect for your employees, your clients, your customers.
That's right.
Your community as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hugely important.
I think sometimes that people have forgotten about that.
Well,
right?
I think so. But it is a different world. And a lot of people's homes aren't what they were. Internationally, there's so much trouble and strife that here, in such a mixed society also, we engage with people who've lost everything in their home country, or come from a nation of so many people that they actually have to fight for position.
Yeah.
Which brings you all the way back to me in 1980. There were so few people. I didn't really have many people in the way that you would call competitors.
Yeah.
And so I had opportunities that if I looked at a youngster today who's come from one of those countries where their families lost everything, their mindset will be very different. Mine was, I had great stability. And so I could move forward, I could take risks. I never had to fight dirty. And maybe I would have been more financially successful if I did. But that's
Possibly.
not my way.
Yeah.
But aren't I lucky that I never had to? And I think if we look at, and after COVID as well, and just life generally, again, generationally, my father would have worked for the same company, and he did for his entire career. Okay, it was a family business, but people used to do the same job or work with the same people forever. Since 2008, 2009, that changed dramatically. And whilst people had invested in businesses, committed themselves, were loyal to the business, all of a sudden money was more important. And on the one hand, and I know I had to do this, I had to cut staff. And I would say I have to make these decisions to protect the majority.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to do, though.
Very.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, so difficult decisions have to be made, and you have to take them because it's to do with survival and survival of the core. But I think, there are a lot of people who went to university, had a career, and were so let down in 2009 when they thought that they had joined some of the big international companies and they would have a career and they would be there forever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, well, no, actually, we have to let you go because last in, first out. So we've got a lot of pockets or groups of people who've come through different world events that, through no fault of their own, have compromised their career opportunity and growth.
Yeah.
Life's very hard for some people. And others are very lucky. And if you don't appreciate how lucky you are, you're doing a disservice to those who've suffered. So I think, respecting the problem that people have had and making allowances for situations that people are in is what we need to do.
It's very wise.
Well, in part, that's because one of my children is in a competitive sport. And the competitive world is wicked.
Yeah.
It's so tough that it helps me understand that there are so many people who have great ambition, but their industry is ruthless. So again, we learn. And as long as we learn from these things.
Well, that's important, right? Is that learning and looking at that experience and saying, what can I take from that to do better?
Yeah. That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly.
So you've made so much impact across so much of, especially in the UAE. What legacy would you like to leave behind?
Well, I think that the importance of what I did was give an opportunity to people to grow, and now they will take their opportunities and give other people those opportunities with integrity, treat people with respect, and now there are more people doing the same thing, because many of them will say that their years at Estico were the best years, and now it's down to them to replicate that same experience elsewhere. I probably should have started an Astico alumni, and I'm not at liberty to do that now. But actually, the number of good people that I worked with who can give that same message of treating one another with respect, working hard, with integrity.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of people who I've worked with who I hope will now spread that same message.
Amazing. And that's what the world needs more. People like that in business to lead with integrity and kindness and inclusivity.
Yeah, that's right.
Elaine, thank you so much for your wisdom today.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Good.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. If you want to be on top of the numbers in your business, why not download Female Fusion's SME dashboard? It is the exact dashboard that we use in Female Fusion to track all of our numbers, the financial numbers, the marketing numbers, customer service numbers. It really helps us stay on top of everything in the business. As I say, you can't grow what you don't know. So if you'd like to grab it, we've included a link in the show notes, or you can go to femalefusionnetwork.com/SME-dashboard. Now that might be a bit complicated, so just hop on over to the show notes and you can grab it.